podcast. I'm Annabelle Lambert. I'm here with my regular co-host, Robert Pye. Today, I'm not going to give him opportunity to say hello today because he just always pauses just too long. So today I am delighted to be joined we are delighted to be joined by Josh Gaillemin, who we met earlier this year at a CIPD conference. Josh works for an organisation called The Whole Story with another wonderful person called Lily Pender. Hello, Lily. And their mission is to help people tell much better, tell their stories in a much more better, meaningful, connecting way is my short headline. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Josh to tell you about him, who he is, what is his mission, what is about in his life, and anything he wishes to share. Your story, Josh. Over to you.
Thanks very much. So, good morning. Yes, I'm Josh. I'm half of The Whole Story with Lily, and we've been working together since 2004, working initially on just trying to understand how to create stories and how to help people become storytellers. We used to tell traditional folk tales, was my background. I used to go into schools and museums and festivals and things, and I made my money, earned my living telling stories. Then I had children and I had to earn a respectable amount to be able to clothe them as well. So I couldn't just go into schools anymore. And I started doing training. And actually, I just do training now. I much prefer it. I would happily go into schools maybe once or twice a year just for the pure showing off of it, because it's such an adrenaline buzz. And you're like the naughty uncle who excites everyone and then just leaves them with the teacher and moves on to the next place, which is
The
really...
sugar rush.
Oh, it is. It's exactly the same for them and for me. But I'm not going to fight for it because actually I really much prefer working with adults. I love running workshops on storytelling, on how to use storytelling within your workspace. So not in a way of sort of finding metaphor stories for what you're looking into, but really trying to understand what is it in story and storytelling that helps people connect to you and through you to your message. And how can you learn those techniques so as to be able to adapt what and how you say so as to better connect with the people you're speaking to. It's a hugely satisfying thing to do. My school reports pretty much every subject and every year at some point would say, if Matthew, because I wasn't Josh in those days, if Matthew spent a little bit more time, a little bit less time talking and a little bit more time focusing, goodness knows what he could achieve. And I used to very much enjoy going into schools and saying, for all of you who just can't stop talking, it's absolutely fine. You'll become storytellers later in life. And it's a really pleasant and uplifting and joyous thing to do. A little bit of background. I am 49. I am the middle child, for whatever that means.
The second problem child.
Which one are you? You certainly weren't the eldest. I'm like, no, I wasn't the eldest.
We're both number 3, Rob and I.
Oh, yeah.
Can't you tell?
Naughty number, yeah.
I think number 2 gets away with the most, actually. I think the first ends up having to live up, it's not the expectations, but the attempt at good parenting with your first child. We all really make the effort and possibly read 1 or 2 of the books, but certainly stick to the discipline and all of those things. Come the second one, you're like, yeah, we kind of know what we're doing. And it slightly falls out the window, I think. My elder brother I've only got one brother, he's a doctor, and he said to me once, and I thought this was quite interesting, that as the second child, you're not rebelling against your parents, but you're rebelling against the first child and the sort of the goodness and the properness that the first child has to embody. And the second child argues against that. And I think there's probably...
And then the third child, I give you the third person, my pop theory on that is that the parents have given up by child number 3. And therefore... The third child is probably raised by siblings rather than parents, and they have a much easier ride than the first one for all the reasons that you said. But they probably get to be, well, in my case, a little bit naughtier when it comes to stirring things up in the family. That was my experience.
I'm not sure that was the case in our family. No, my sister is the younger child. I think she had the huge disadvantage of having two brothers who were born 15 months apart and then a gap of only like 3 years before her. But looking back very unfairly, we had formed quite a tight two, and then she would come and not understand how we lived in a what was an old war hut, so something that had been made to last maybe 5 years, and this is in the 80s. We're living in it, so it was an amazing space, really. um, but it was just one long corridor that pretended to be rooms, and we would line up all of our cars from one end to the other and then move one an inch and then the next one, and because she wasn't invited to be part of it, she would just come and smash it all up, which actually was the correct answer, but it did not endear her to us. So I think for her, being the third child probably wasn't as much fun, really, than the two of us. But when you're younger, you
So,
don't really
so
get into that, so you just crack on with what you're doing. And
Exactly.
I, yeah, so I would tag along. My brother was 15 months older, but 2 years ahead in school. So I got to tag along with all of his mates and be the one who was just not quite good enough at all the sports they did. That was my role. So, yeah.
so I want to fill in some bits in the middle in terms of listeners, the audience, because and at this early stage, I
Oh,
want to do a full
right.
disclosure and say that Annabelle and I are super fans of the.
I should have gone.
And for listeners, Annabelle and I are holding up now our little books of the whole story, which is a product, one of the products of us attending a whole day or half day workshop, which was a taster of the type of training that Josh and Lily and the whole story do. And for us, it's been the most remarkable connection because uh, Josh and Lily, who lead the whole story, help people unpick and discover, almost like forensically, how you might put together a good story for anybody who wants to communicate anything. Think about the audience, think about yourself, think about the motives, think, yeah, da da da. Yeah, really quite taxing stuff. And the connection for ethos is we've got this thing called value exchange, which is all about your story, but we've never tried to train people. We've never tried to help people. We've never tried to educate them. We've always, assumed this storytelling thing is quite an innate thing that is kind of like, okay, just tell us your story, rather than something that actually might require you to think about who you're talking to, what you want to say, that kind of thing. Um, and I've over the years, for my own gratification, unpicked storytelling a bit, but never to the degree that you would enjoy if you were part of a Josh and Lily workshop. So I want to take you from the boisterous, talkative student to your mastery of the theory behind storytelling and how you did, and the bit in the middle. How did you get
Yeah,
from
yeah.
there to here?
Well, my parents sent us to a bit of a hippie school where storytelling, creativity, art, all of that was fundamental from start to finish. And so when I went to university, I did a drama course, and one of the modules in year 3 was storytelling. And under no circumstances was I going to go and do that one because it just reminded me of lots of sort of velvet and all of that side of storytelling from my childhood, which was rebelling against as strongly as I could. But then when it came to choosing the modules, I thought actually this is a great thing to try, and that was the start of it. I came out thinking, okay, I really enjoyed it. We finished by creating stories, and I told the story of my grandmother, who my mother was born in Morocco, and how they had travelled over to England, and my mother's grandfather used to travel to Manchester a lot. He like imported shoes or some random thing. My brother at the time was a student in Manchester. There was all these crazy connections going everywhere. And my gran came to hear it to the end of year bit to hear it. And I was really impressed by how much she enjoyed it and how much we could all just lose ourselves in this. it then moved on. I finished uni and, like all good drama students, tried to set up a drama company with a friend of mine, Matt, and we spent a lot of time very pretentiously sort of throwing sticks as symbolic of energy in a park and all sorts of things going on. And I didn't get anywhere. But then I went traveling with my then girlfriend. And when I came back, he told me he had managed to get himself a job in our local museum in Southeast London, the Horniman Museum. He said, "Oh, I've managed to get a job." And during the interview, they kept asking me, "Who is your assistant?" And I thought, I don't have an assistant. So I just said, "You're my assistant. So if it's okay, um, we're starting." I was off to Trinidad for a month. And when I came back on the Monday, that Saturday was our first gig. Now, it's incredibly hard to get work in museums, in the museum sector. That I've been training in it since '98, now training people in it and working in it. But for me, the very first time I set foot in the Horniman Museum, I was being paid to run a workshop. And now that's the kind of level of luck that I had fallen into. We had never taught before. We had never worked in museums before. We had never worked with children before. Well, we had no experience. We spent 3 days in our local park trying to come up with an idea of what we would do. We did it. It's not going to sound particularly modest. It was incredibly successful and very, very good. And immediately they asked us to come back for more. And that just kept building up. And then I became one of their in-house storytellers. And I would just, every time I managed to have a gig, I would then go to Foyles and buy myself a new book on stories, a different one, and just kept learning and learning. So I was never, other than doing the course at university where, you have one lesson a week for a couple of months, 3 months or whatever the length of it was, I had absolutely no training in this. But it was something that I just found naturally very easy to do and incredibly satisfying, because you didn't need to memorize stuff like when you were learning drama, and you didn't need to learn your lines. It didn't matter if you wanted to be sat down, if you were tired, if you're fully animated and becoming all the characters. And I mainly told animal stories, so I'd be crawling around the floor as the lion and biting the head off this, and just really throwing myself into it, which I found so much fun. And also because actually I still am, I'm quite uncomfortable and shy around people, so I didn't really enjoy the idea of an ensemble piece. I liked it, but you were so responsible for it to work for other people as well. Whereas here, it was just down to me. If I made a mistake, that's fine. It's only egg on my face. And if I get it right, then that's great. All the glory's mine. So it made it really, the responsibility just felt much easier, I think, for me when I wasn't responsible for other people's successes. And so I just got more and more into it. And then I started working for an agency, and I said to them one day, "Do you know what? Any job that anyone doesn't want, I'll take it." And they're like, "Oh, really? Okay." So they would send me to Hull on the Monday, to Oxford on Tuesday, to the Isle of Wight on Wednesday, like storytelling week, on National Book Week, just be completely hectic. And I would always come home, leave at 5, get the 5:30 train. And you can be anywhere from London for a 9 o'clock or a 9:30 start, pretty much. So it was through the repetition of doing it over and over and over again that you just become good at something, because you either become bored of it or you improve. And those are your only two options, really. I was working for a housing association at the time and doing this on the sly. And I was working just 3 days a week. We had a training cafe for the term, I don't know what the term is today, but the term then was vulnerable adults. So people with homelessness and drug addiction problems and alcohol and lots of mental health issues and everything that you would assume related to that. And I was working, so there were 4 of our staff, and we would help in the kitchens. We were teaching these people to cook, and then we would also help at the till, and we were teaching them how to serve the public, and also really basic skills, reading, writing, all of these sort of things. Now, it's quite difficult to teach someone to read when you've never been given any instruction or any idea of how to teach someone how to read. And if you add on top of that these are not neurotypical people, many of them, and lots of different mental health issues and problems. And I was asked, this guy's like, what is it that makes you want to learn to read? He's like, "I want to write a book." I said, "Okay, let's write a book." And the two of us, and I mean, his speech impediment, it was almost impossible to understand what he said. And his book was based around Star Trek, which a character from Star Trek, which I've never seen, which made it even more confusing. But it took us about a year, and we made a book. We created this thing, we got it printed up, like 50 copies of it or 100 copies of it. He handed them out to people. Now, about 8 or 9 years later, I did a day of training for a charity in London that creates like club nights for disabled people. And I said to them, because I knew he used to go to this club, I said, "Oh, if it isn't like an issue with confidentiality and so on, does this chap ever will come to your dues?" Because I worked with him and I really liked him, and I created, we created, I didn't create, he created this book and I helped him with it. And they turned around and said, "Oh my God," and showed me, because they do their club nights at the South Bank. Based on that book, they had taken the characters of that book and made them into this superhero character. And when he was DJing on the South Bank, they had created the entire backdrop at the South Bank were the characters from the book that we had created together, and turned it into an immense club night. And these tiny little things like that were just so satisfying and just so insane and joyous at the same time. But it was, again, just trying to veer back to your question, Robert, it was just falling into it. There was no plan, there was no structure, there was no support really, there was no learning offered to you, no training. And it was just, well, this seems fun. Well, this kind of works. I can just about make enough money like this to keep going. And this carried on and carried on. And then I was single, and like all good single boys, I used to go on holiday with my mum. And for a couple of years, we went to India, and, because I'd really liked it in India, and I thought she would enjoy it as a place to go. She completely fell in love with the place, and we had friends out there. One of whom uh, kind of ran kind of a drama school, in that he just would run workshops here and there, really. Um, and me and my mum's a drama teacher. We went and delivered some workshops for them, and it was just the most amazing experience, because there with these young people, well, young sort of 16 to 25-ish-year-old folk, they were so pleased to have somebody teaching them a different style from a different place, showing their expertise, that in a 1 day workshop, you covered what would take maybe 7, 8 days in the UK, because the trust was there. Everyone was just open and delighted and trying everything. And they kept saying, "You must come back, you must come back. Come for a month." And I thought, oh my God, in a month, we're going to do like a year's worth of work. We're going to put on this show at the end. It's going to be the most amazing showcase. I had been at this housing association for 5 years, and I had lost my love of the organization itself, not the people, but the structure and the organization, and the inability to have any promotion unless you went into management. Just, I found really depressing. And so I thought, if I go out there for a month and put on this project, when I come back, I can say, look, this is the kind of stuff I do. And Lily, who is the other half of the whole story, who I had met at university and also been in a drama group with, had said, "Oh, actually, I could really do with a change as well. I'd like to come." And my initial reaction was, absolutely not. This is my baby. This is my project. It took me so much. I had to take a month unpaid leave. I had to pay for my own flights out there. I wasn't being paid to run the workshops. I had to pay for my own accommodation, everything. So it took me a year to save up enough to go. And she was like, "Oh, come on, let me come." I was like, "You've got to be joking. This is, I'm going to do it." I planned every day, all 30 days of workshops, not a day off. I was absolutely adamant on everything happening. Anyway, Lily, quite rightly, and I'm hugely grateful for her for doing this, insisted that she come and just booked herself a ticket home. It was, the right move, because we went out there, and if you can do 7 days worth of work in 1 day, you can do maybe 5 days worth of work over a month. Because actually, if you're there for a month, it's not that exciting. There's lots of other stuff going on. There are festivals they need to attend, and there's duty to family and all sorts of other things that come in. And so actually, we got almost nothing done in that time. And I found it really heartbreaking, really difficult, because of everything that I had all my hopes and expectations and all my future rested on this. I mean, that's a stupid starting point for anything, but I had so much hope to go in that direction. And when I came back, it hadn't worked how I wanted at all. We didn't really have a show at the end. Nothing really pulled off. I mean, there were some interesting bits in it, but it was nothing like what I had planned. And I was just telling everyone it was an unmitigated disaster and how upset I was by the whole thing. Whereas Lily was saying, "God, yeah, it was really interesting, and we did this and we did this," and she could find not trying to sort of whitewash it or big it up, but she could find all of the stuff that was actually really incredible that we pulled off in a month. And I was like, oh God, you're right. You're absolutely right. But the bit that was most interesting was how much we enjoyed working together. And so we decided, okay, let's let's just see what we can do. And we used to photocopy little papers saying storytelling workshop. I mean, I would literally staple them to trees in the area and book out a cafe, and we would charge people the equivalent of what it cost us to book out the cafe and do like a 2 day course or a 7 week evening, 7 weeks of evening. And people would come, random people that you'd never met before who just lived in the area would come and get involved and really like it. And it was very satisfying. Now, we weren't doing this at the time, but reverse engineering, we were learning our craft. We were understanding how to run workshops and how to deliver things and how to work together and all of the bits that are required in running a workshop. And then one day, this chap, and I can't remember where he worked, but he had like a proper corporate job, and he said, "Oh, I find this
A
so
proper
helpful."
corporate job, you know.
Well, that's very much how it felt like when you're working
And
part time in a training cafe, trying to run storytelling workshops in the evenings, and going into schools to tell the story of how the lion got his roar. Someone who worked in the city felt like, okay, this guy's serious. He's a proper person. And he said, I'm finding this really helpful. I'm finding this really helpful at work. And Lily is a much more questioning and she's able to look at things and understand and pick apart and so on. Whereas I'm a little bit sort of, So I was thinking, this guy specifically was doing how the lion got his roar. And I was thinking, how is that relevant to work? How on earth are you telling this story to people at work? Of course, he wasn't. What he was doing was taking on a lot of the techniques that we had been teaching him and just adapting them for when he was in a meeting or when he had to give a presentation or whatever it was. And so we thought, oh, okay. And Lily and I mean, at the time, we had one laptop between us. So one would type and the other one would look over the shoulder. We were really just thinking of starting up. And she put into Google storytelling for business, and a whole load of stuff came up. And one of them was for the NHS, the Institute for Innovation and Improvement. We looked up the name of the person, we emailed them, and we said, we do storytelling for business. And she said, oh, great, fantastic. Why don't you come up and we'll have a meeting? So we turned up, we had a meeting, we talked our way through it, and they went, oh, we've actually got a conference coming up. It's 300 people. You can have the slot, a 1 hour slot after lunch. We did not know how awful the 1 hour slot after lunch is because we had never done a conference. We had never done a large group. We hadn't done anything like that. So we just rocked up and we were like,
you
right.
didn't realise
Just having
you just
it
won the
graveyard
booby
shift.
prize.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It was horrific. It was horrific. We turned up, we were such Puritans. They were like, right, let's mic you up. We're like, we don't use microphones, we're storytellers. It's the voice and the timbre and all this. So the people at the back probably couldn't hear us, which didn't help to everything. But the main issue was they had all come out from lunch. They were all meeting colleagues and friends and people they hadn't seen for a long time. They were sat there, these two kids at the front, trying to tell them to do certain things. And a percentage of them were chatting to the person sitting next to them. And I found that one of the most crushing things possible because I wasn't looking and seeing, well, these guys are enjoying it and doing it. Just work with them and let the others have their chat because they're just not interested. I could only focus on the fact that not every single person was hanging on to every word I was saying, and I just could not get over it. But at the end of it, once they got all their feedback and everything, they said, oh, that was really good. You did really well. I've had such good feedback from this person, and these people got loads from it, and these people did. And yeah, it would have been better if you'd been mic'd and people could hear you. But generally, actually, it worked really well. And then up until maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, we kept a relationship with them and kept working with them on their leadership programs within the NHS and on all sorts of other things. So again, Robert, it comes back to that thing. We just fell into it. We've a little bit of blagging, a lot of luck. The other one that was really fortunate was there was a charity called Arts and Business, one of the king now, I suppose. There was the Prince's charities back in the day, and their role was to try and get creative people from the creative industries into businesses to run workshops and things, and then people from corporate businesses like onto the boards of arts organizations. And they ran a session, like an introductory session. How do you even start trying to sell your stuff? And Lily and I dutifully paid our £100 each and sat there listening, going, okay, but how much do you charge? That's the practical question we wanted to know. What do you put down? And they're like, well, it really depends. And everything's very open. Of course it is. And like, we have no idea what you're talking about. And at the end, having scribbled notes galore, when the workshop finished and everyone was leaving, the person running it said, oh, could you just stay for a minute? There's a couple of questions we wanted to ask you. And they basically said, we think what you've got is a fantastic idea. It's brilliant. We know exactly where we can place you. And about a month later, they placed us with EY. And we were like, okay, how does that work? They're like, don't worry, we do all the paperwork. We take a cut from it. You get paid. We organize the entire thing. You just go in there and run some workshops. And it was the first time we'd been paid properly, which was immensely gratifying, but quite an eye-opener compared to going into schools and things. And it just made us also, people then, because people tell, oh, what do you do as a job? Oh, I work in storytelling. And everyone goes, oh, that's so sweet. How nice for you. How lovely. Are you working with children? Oh. And you'd say, yeah, all of that. But also, actually, last week I was working with EY on the relaunch of their brand. And like, oh, okay. Oh, and then suddenly people take you more seriously, are more interested in listening to what you offer and to see how it might be of use to them. And again, it was another thing we fell into. We didn't know it would be like that. We just hoped it would. And again, we have had our relationship with EY. Not since the pandemic, we haven't been back, but up until that point, so from like 2005 maybe, so a really lovely, healthy relationship that continued there. And it's been like that ever since. I'm here with you guys because we had a chat. Rob was fantastically keen to chat and really understand things when we met at CIPD. Annabelle's laugh is actually what convinced me that we should work together. That was the bit that I thought,
Bringing people together across the
it is.
world.
No, but I think it was. It absolutely was. It is so rare that people laugh so freely and openly that I thought, "Shit, this is great. These are people who are just there, who are just in the space, and who you can get to meet the first time, and you're not battling through everything, trying to understand who they are and what the point is and the interest and everything. You're just having a conversation." And I said to Lily afterwards, I don't know, I can't quite understand what it is that they're doing, but I think there's something there that's really worth finding out, really worth spending time with them and seeing what it is and what happens. So again,
I'm going to do another interruption.
No, please.
I can't help myself. I'm still trying to unpick things, and Annabelle's still laughing, and we're both trying to kind of find where where next in this space. So it continues to fascinate me, this sort of the piece between an individual and an organization. That's always been a theme. You've mentioned in your story quite a few times the sort of relationship with organizations, institutions, and but every time that we give people permission to talk about themselves, regardless of whether, like you, they're a sort of professional storytelling individual or not, then something happens and they get into a groove and they can talk, whoever, introvert, extrovert, just tell me about that little story that's happening in your mind. And sometimes it takes half a minute, sometimes half a second. Didn't take that long with you, of course, because you do it for a living. But then, once you're familiar with that story and you have permission with that, your own story, you can then take that into the world with other stories, stories about things that don't necessarily have any relationship with yourself on first inspection. But when you go deeper into it, as you can see, I'm a geek. I want to unpick every part of everything and kind of, and then in your workshop, then you've taken all of that into a series of fun or exploratory safe exercises where people would actually do these things. But
Mm.
but back to my point, using their first person experience of life to develop them, and I think that's a wonderful bridge. So somebody might start off as a prospect for your workshop, going, "Oh, storytelling, children, don't know what that's about. Okay, I'll turn, and then actually, when you put through people through the techniques, um, they're experiencing some fairly unique things. So they probably haven't, because they're experiential rather than 1+1=2. They're not theoretical sort of
Yeah.
skills. So how did you've got all this experience and you've got this sort of life passage to where you are now in the workshop. You and Lily, how did you put it down into, well, we're going to do this in an hour, we're going to do this in 2 days, breaking that down into what
Well,
works and what doesn't work?
initially it really didn't work because we wanted to cram into 2 days all the best things from our 3 years at university, all the best things from our childhood, all the best things from everything we
Yeah,
learned. And we
I've
wanted
got my hand up
everyone
because
to get,
that's me. That's what
yeah,
I'd want to do. I want to tell them
everyone
everything.
get everything. And of course
Yeah,
it doesn't work. And it's only, I think the real craft to running and creating and delivering workshops is to simplify things, to make things as simple as you can, because especially if you're doing something that's creative, if you're working with people who haven't had an opportunity to be creative, don't see themselves as creative, are frightened that it will be embarrassing or humiliating or that they'll get it completely wrong, then actually the challenge is just being there is quite a challenge. And so the placing the simplifying it and the making it step by step and making sure that people can't be humiliated at any point. I think that's been the founding principle. Lily, although you would struggle to think it when you met her, and how incredibly she's just brilliant. She's absolutely brilliant to run workshops, but she's so insightful as well. But actually was incredibly shy when she was younger and was not the person who'd put her hand up in class and was not the person who'd answer. And it was through drama that she found this ability to actually express herself and feel confident within things. But she has been adamant from the start that people wouldn't ever feel uncomfortable within it. Now they do feel uncomfortable because we're asking them to do things, but we're trying to create a space that feels safe enough to push people outside of their comfort zones. Sorry, Annabelle.
No, I was just because I'm really interested in that technical point because I feel, it's horrendous when you get pushed out of your comfort zone. Try working with
Mm.
Rob Pye, but it's actually that's cliche, but those are the moments that you grow or you learn or you
Yeah.
do whatever. Because we ran this, we we watched over some young people while they designed a workshop, and of course from their perspective, ooh, from their perspective, they were like, oh, we hate those moments when somebody makes you get up and do this, that, and the other. I don't want to, let's not do those things. And I still think back and I think actually, sometimes you need a bit of that discomfort just to move you on. So I'm interested in how you attain the balance, get the balance right. Because otherwise you probably don't grow enough, or as much as you possibly could by just edging over the edge of your comfort zone every now and again.
Absolutely. There's a lot to be said, for example, for filming people whilst they do something and then looking over what they've done and unpicking it. But that to us would be too much. It just feels too intrusive, and it feels too humiliating. But for many people, that is one of the most powerful and successful ways to do things. So part of it has also been thinking, what would we be comfortable doing ourselves, and therefore what can we model in the space, how can we push ourselves to make sure we've got it. It took us a long time. We kind of had roles within it. So Lily would always do the introductions because my heart would be like this at the start of the workshop, and it would take me 10 minutes or 5 minutes just to settle down enough so I wasn't talking a bit, gosh, I'm so sorry, my voice is and just be able to speak to people. And I would then do a lot more of the trying to whip up the energy and build the atmosphere within it. And then it's crossed over now. Now we run most of our workshops on our own for a start, but then when we're together, it just flips between us, and that we don't even, like the workshop you came to, we don't even plan who's going to do which bit or anything. We just do it, and we kind of know each other so well now that I think part of it is, if we can be so comfortable, it can, you're almost modeling and creating an atmosphere in a space that allows other people to be comfortable. If you can have that, we talked about during the workshop that try to have a conversational tone of voice in the way that you speak, but we try and do that from the front as well. We're not trying to be didactic or sound like a lecturer or a professor, or using all the terminology that would show that we've read 58 books on this or anything like that. We're trying to, no, I know, but you do go to workshops where it's like that, or you do, or presentations where people are so keen that you know that they've done their research. Do your research, sure. If you need research, go ahead and do it. But then translate it into yourself and share it to other people. I say that because you should do research, but I have never read a single book on storytelling, and I probably never, actually, that's not true. I listened to one because I've become very keen on audiobooks, and it's Will Orr, The Science of Storytelling. I have to say, it is one of the best books I've ever read, so I will give a massive shout out to that. It's really fantastic. He's a writer at The Guardian, and he does a lot of storytelling workshops and training. He's an author, and it's truly magnificent because it's looking at neuroscience and storytelling and sort of the history of oral storytelling, and trying to see what can we learn from each of those about the other. And it's
It's
one of
interesting
the,
because you go on.
no,
Sorry.
all I was going to say is, not trying to big ourselves up, but when Lily read it and I read it, and we were like, Christ, this is basically what we do. He goes into more detail into certain things, but all the principles that we have come to through experience and through repeated work and noticing how people react and change and do things and adapting what we do depending on who's in the space and moving the workshop around from that, and just growing it actually has neurological validity within it. And that was hugely satisfying as well, or not satisfying, gratifying really, to realize that just through the practice and not being stuck on no, we have to do this and we have to do that, but adapting it and adapting the way you talk about it depending on who's there. Actually, so much about it is, storytelling is about connection, and I think running workshops is about connection, because if people can't have faith in you at the front, in your knowledge, in your ability, in just in you, then they're never going to be really listening. And that's the whole purpose around storytelling as well. You're not trying to impose yourself on someone, you're trying to allow something through you to reach them, whether it's a message or a story or an idea, whatever it might be. The idea is the important bit, and it's coming through you to them. That is the success. That is successful storytelling for me. Not looking at the person and going, Christ, they're really good at this. No, you shouldn't notice the storyteller until the end, when you come back and go, oh, that was so wonderful when they did this and they did that and they did that. And it was just so engaging. I lost myself in what I was listening to. But you shouldn't be noticing it in the moment, because you should be completely present in what's being shared with you. And the storyteller also should be completely present in what's happening, so that they're not trying to think, am I getting it right? Am I connecting that? You need to be there. You need to completely be aware of everyone around you, but you need to be completely in the moment, so that if nothing else, you're modeling what you want other people to do. Sorry, Annabelle, you were going to speak and I just talked over you again.
No, but it's important you finish your point. No, I mean, not. It was just going back to your comment about, storytelling. It always makes me smile when people go, "Oh, is that with children?" Because actually, storytelling is is age old folklore. Icelandic sagas. It's like everything we've ever done is best communicated through the story, through stories, and I think we have perhaps forgotten that and forgotten the art of storytelling, but I see a lot more conversation about how important it is for people to tell stories now. So we're
it's playful as
relearning
well.
that. Pardon?
It's a playful thing as well. I heard this wonderful interview with Brian Eno, and he was talking about how, he was an incredibly intelligent man. He could have been a success in any number of different things. And this person who had been like a mentor to him said, why are you doing music? You could be, he was into science, he was into philosophy, I can't even remember what, but he was a genius in many areas. And he said, because creativity and the arts is how we play as adults. We don't play as adults. You play as children and you don't play as adults. But when you are in a creative act, you are playful and playing. And that is how we learn, and that is where the joy is, and that is where the whole point of life is. So that is why I do music. And I think his music's fantastic. And it just says a lot that he gave the same weight to it as what I was referring to as a proper job at the start of this. You
Yeah,
know,
no,
in fact,
I'm like, I
much
flinched
more
when you were
weight. No, I know, I know. But that was
the
very much
proper
how I
job.
saw it. I was in my early 20s
No,
and
of
I was
course,
looking at
me
this
too
going,
at that
oh,
time.
you know, early 20s, late 20s, still thinking that, you know. Whereas now I see the difference is many people my age are, or around, you know, around 50, then quit their job and try and find something meaningful that they want to do, or have a second family and try and be present when the kids are really young, or whatever it is. And Lily and I were laughing about this the other day because we realized we didn't need to have a nervous breakdown at 50. We opted into this option at 30 or at 25. We were like, well, this is just how we're going to do it. You know, we're not going to make lots of money, but we're going to have as much time as we need. Lily has 2 children. I have 2 children. We have had the privilege of spending an enormous amount of time as they grow up. My ex-wife is also very helpful because she's flexible around childcare. We share 50-50, but if I'm working and working away, she's, you know, so I've got a lot of support around me to allow me to have this great freedom. But actually, it means that I've had a very satisfying life like that. I've had a satisfying parenting. I've had satisfying work. Um, I have a flat where my kids have their own room, you know, a room each because there's a boy and a girl. That's all you kind of need, really. And you don't need to get to the point where you're, whichever age you are, and decide, oh, I can't work in the city anymore. I need to go and make cheese or whatever it is, because that's great. That's no, I mean, that's great. Go and make cheese. But why don't you just make cheese to start with? You know, because that would have been much more satisfying, and you could have taken that risk at a time when it didn't really matter. Lily and I set up when neither of us had partners, neither of us had particularly daunting mortgages. We didn't have children. We didn't have any pulls on us. We only had to look after ourselves. And so, if you're not going to take a risk then to have a crack at something you actually want to do, then when the hell are you going to do it? When you're safe. But you'll never be safe enough because the more money you make, the more expensive your mortgage will be because you'll get a nicer house or in a nicer place or a bigger car or whatever it is that is satisfying to you. And that's great. I don't have a car. I live in a council block and actually it works fine. You know, it works absolutely fine that way. And it's just simpler. You know, it's a much simpler system. And I've discovered Vinted, so I've even got lots of nice new hoodies recently.
I love Vinted.
Oh my god! Don't go on there on a Friday night, is all I'm going to say, because you wake up and all sorts of things. So yeah, a collection of Vans trainers now for some reason, and a lot of Adidas hoodies. So there we go.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
but you know, I think it's something that I'm really noticing with people around my age of this one, you know, becoming a yoga instructor, for example, and that's brilliant. But you could have been a yoga instructor 30 years ago, and you can now be at the peak of your yogic powers in instructing and really have that life and not have had all the stress that you had before. Some people really enjoyed the stress and the journey to get there and really like those jobs, and that's fantastic. But if you don't like it, then it just feels like, yeah, a
Do
lot
you
of
think
time to
there's
get
more
on.
permission? Do you think there's more permission nowadays for younger people to actually? Because I think, you know, that the proper job, you know, was where certainly where we've, you know, those of us who grew up in the 80s, teenagers in the 80s, were, you know, that's where we were heading. We're all heading for a proper job. That's, you know, what
But
you
we
did, and,
don't have
and
careers
everybody
now.
before us, of course, was the same,
Yeah,
even worse, you know.
yeah,
And I just wonder whether there's a little bit more permission now. So you'll have outliers like you, me. I feel
yeah.
I'm one too, you know, sort of finding that I just, you know, didn't want to do that. I always made a little joke about my CV was like, you know, when you say, well, I fell into this and I fell into this and I fell into this, and I feel I sort of did quite a lot of that
Mm.
in my life. But if you look back, it's like people would pay good money to have my CV. You know, I've worked for EY, and I've worked for PwC, and I've worked for Capita, and I've worked for, you know, and so it's, I'm just, do you think there's more permission, I think, to just,
I think it's a mix
you
of
know, follow
permission
your
and need.
dream? Mm.
Like, so my brother's a doctor, and if you are a doctor, or my girlfriend works for the council, you know, there's career paths still in these things that you can make your way up. You're fairly secure. It's not that easy to be fired, but also if you really apply yourself and are good at it, you will progress within it. There's even still pensions in some of these places, you know. So there's all sorts of things. I know it's a shocker,
Where?
but but the point is, you have there was career progression and an assumption that you could work for life in a place. Even in the 80s, that was still an assumption if you
Oh
started
yeah.
somewhere. But today, people don't come out assuming that they're going to enter an organization and work there for 30 years or 40 years. They know that it's almost impossible, other than certain careers, for that to happen. It's just not going to happen. You're going to have a number of different things you need to do, and hopefully some of them are going to be things that you want to do, as well as the rest that goes around it. So, I mean, my son is 14 now. He is, I think the term is a train enthusiast. When we were younger, you'd say a train spotter. And he is an obsessive train spotter. He absolutely adores this, and he's so focused on it. It can be difficult to listen to on a daily basis, but it is something that he is incredibly passionate about. Now, he wants to be a train driver. And a couple of years ago, I was like, not too sure about that. It's all going to be automated in a few years. There aren't going to be train drivers. And then I thought, Josh, why would you say that? Because actually, the answer is you want to be a train driver. If by the time you are qualified to be a train driver, there is 1 year left of train driving to be done, you will have had the last year of train driving, and it is what you really want to do. And then you'll find something else that you want to do. So even for him, I wouldn't be saying to him, well, there's just no future in this, because who
So
cares?
here's a story. Here's a story for just for one audience member, which is Josh's son. I have a best friend who also likes trains, and he used to work for British Rail, was it called? And
Yeah.
he was
You're old enough.
he led a spin out to become a management consultant in the train industry, and he was very financially and successful, and I haven't spoken to him for a little while in every way, but he followed his passion, you know, into the train industry. And you know, and he will make trains exciting, so you know, you can listen to him all, and he's just got so much passion, you know, just so Josh's son and Martin, there's a shout out for both of you there. So.
But I think it's just, I was very lucky in that I was brought up in what was quite an unconventional way at the time. So my parents aren't from England. They came over when I was 1 year old to do a teacher training course, and then my mum stayed as a teacher there. But my dad brought us up. And at the time, in the mid 70s and early 80s, to have a father who was doing the house husband, I suppose would be the term now, just wasn't a thing. It just wasn't. So he did that whilst he was studying, and he was studying to do a particular sort of movement therapy, which was a 7-year course. Once he got 5 years into it, his beloved teacher, who I think was probably in her 80s, went back to Switzerland because she wanted to finish her life there. She was Swiss, and she continued teaching. So my dad went to Switzerland for 2 years when my mum was a full-time teacher with 3 children under the age of 8 and 3 boarders living in our house to make ends meet. And looking back on it, I'm like, flipping heck, that's impressive. But her point was, that's what he wants to do. He needs to go and do that. So both of my parents came from moneyed families where the money stopped at their generation. And in mum's case, everything was taken away. Everything was stolen, basically, by a family member. And in dad's case, well, it just ran out. But both of them said, chasing money is of no interest whatsoever, because you've got no control over it. It can just disappear. Now, I appreciate you can only say that from a privileged position of having had money. You cannot say that when you have been struggling and doing 5 jobs to make ends meet. That is not a position you can take. So I would like to acknowledge that. But it did give me this idea of, my mum was a teacher for 40 odd years. And she said, well, this is what I want to do, and this is what I enjoy. She was paid a pittance, and in the end treated very badly when she left the school. It was a very unpleasant situation over COVID. But in the build up to that, she did exactly what she wanted in the way that she wanted for the duration of her working life. And as an example, then you're like, well, that clearly works. That works really well. And so I'm going to follow down that line. And just the difficulty is finding what is it that I really want to do. And that's the lucky bit of then falling into this and that and this and that and enjoying it along the way and it working. I think
And
possibly
then
for
the advice for finding what is to try lots of things. Just
yeah, yeah,
just be open, just be open-minded to open your eyes and say, well, maybe doctor, that's good. Maybe banker, that's good. Maybe,
yeah,
storytelling workshop facilitator, that's good too. What does that mean?
yeah.
Just to be
But I mean,
curious about those
I don't
things.
know whether you have like what was it, careers advisors at school still.
There are still, yeah.
But they would
Mhm.
never have suggested any of these things. These are
Mm.
not suggestions. These are not things. They're not career.
No, and they
There's no
still don't,
security
I'm
in it.
afraid, in most cases. It
Right.
still
But I mean, that's
feels
bonkers.
quite traditional.
We've had a slight change of scenery. So I and conscious also of the time, I wanted to ask a potentially deep question. And again, it's back to this my interest in forensically kind of unpicking the individual versus the organization. And for us with value exchange, it doesn't really matter what your story is as an individual, privileged, not privileged, rich, poor, young, old. But if you're in touch with your story and you're comfortable telling your story to yourself and others, then finding your why, finding that purpose isn't so hard. It's just like telling your story a few times. And we've talked in this uh, um, discussion a lot about helping organizations. Um, Something in ethos, and we've done lots of helping organizations, also increasingly working on behalf of individuals in an ideal world, every individual would kind of get this stuff in the classroom, because you took back to that sort of teacher careers advice kind of thing. Find your why, who are you, tell your story, and then that's a bit of a north star, even if that changes because there are no more train drivers in the world. You can still sort of know who you are and how you might navigate. I have this great desire individually, this burning desire for us to do much more of what we do at the individual level. Um, but that's quite a difficult one to build versus well-being for employees versus social value for organization, the things that ethos kind of does. Do you have the same itch in terms of wanting the whole story to be an individual thing as well as an organizational thing? How do you situate that?
I don't know that I do, because I feel that when we work in organizations, it is the individuals that we're working with, and it's
Mm-hmm.
them who, when you have someone who has a real moment of realization, or who finds their voice, who finds that actually not only do they have something to say, but they have the right to say it, or whatever it might be, sometimes not that frequent. I mean, it's not like in every workshop, but relatively often you'll have someone who has a really transformative moment and it just clicks and they get it. Our colleague Ben, who works with voice and breath and body language and dealing with all of the physicality of things, has a lot of these breakthrough moments with people because there's so much emotion stored up within the difficulty of speaking and the fear and so on, that actually we have these transformational moments with people. And whether it's like oh my god, this is me now, or even if it's just, oh well, this will help me in my career progression or whatever it is, it's with individuals that I'm working. So I enjoy having relationships building up with organizations, because then you get to know people better and you're able to finesse and fine tune everything that you do to make it even easier for the next set of people in the workshop to get it and to get as much as they can from it. But to be fair, I've worked with people in such a variety of different jobs. It makes of industries and organizations. it makes literally no difference. Absolutely none. So I always see myself as working with individuals. There's just a bunch of them in the space at that point. Lily does a lot more one-to-one coaching. I'm not that confident with it yet. I think it's because Lily's very good at asking questions and helping people find the answer, whereas my problem would be I would be telling them what I think the answer is, which is probably not what they need in that moment. But it's just a different, we are very different people. And she does that incredibly well. She can get inside people's heads as they're speaking and understand not only where the difficulty is, but why the difficulty is there and how to find a way around it. And that is, so in that sense, Lily does incredible work on an individual basis with people. But I find it much easier to work with a group and then to go around in certain exercises and give a little bit of feedback or a little question or a little prompt or prod to people as we go. And again, that's just been from doing it for so many years and so often. It's often very easy to find the little suggestion that people want within the moment to just take them over to the next part of understanding what it is they're doing. That sort of answer, yeah. So I think I just see a group as individuals rather than as having to work with individuals within it.
Okay.
Excellent. I'm very conscious of the time because we're 57 minutes in,
Yes.
which is a good tranche of time. So the last question that we've been asking of anybody who comes is how can anybody help really? How can we help you and anything you're doing?
I think it's really about continuing building this relationship and finding what we would love is that at some point within some of the areas that you're working, that our training would become a part of it, that people would go, I see it. Because, Rob, you said right at the start, I had wanted to come back to this. We used to think, oh, well, storytelling is an innate thing. People can just do it. Storytelling is an innate thing. It is, everybody can do it. And in fact, the vast majority, everyone does do it. We do it all the time socially, with friends, with family, with loved ones, even with colleagues when talking about non-work related stuff or talking about the gripes about the new IT system or whatever it is, we are storytelling all the time. But sometimes when suddenly there's the need to present or to talk or to share a story or something, people just suddenly block a little bit or freeze a bit, and because it has to be right and it has to be done in this way and this person did this and this person did that, as opposed to thinking, no, this is me speaking. So they need to meet a little bit of me. I said that it's not about the storyteller, it's about the message behind, but you listen to it because it's coming through that person and the way that they shape it and the way that they share it. And your stories are all about personal stories, so it very much has to be about the person. And I think we would be able to help certain of the people that you're with, certain as in some, not positively, but some of the people that you are connected with, to be able to really find that confidence and assurance and understanding that actually, if I just pick up a few little tips and tricks and add them to the way I'm already speaking and the way I communicate, it's not about becoming a great storyteller or a storyteller like Josh or Lily or whoever. It's about thinking, what can I take from storytelling to allow me to come through and what I want to share to be clear and understandable by other people. So I'm hoping that at one point there'll be some combined workshops, or that there'll be some interest in some of the connections you have with it, and hopefully we can find people to come and be part of Ethos, or be just to, nothing's ever immediate, but just to see how it builds and grows and see where it goes. Really, that would be my.
Oh, I'm certain there will be lots of opportunities, no question.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it. The time's just zoomed by.
Bye. Thank you so much, Josh.
Until the next time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.